Aria had never imagined her own name could tremble inside her chest, but the moment Lorenzo asked that question at 3 in the morning, something inside her cracked. His voice wasn't raised, not even sharp, just quiet, steady, hurting in a way that made her throat burn. Aria felt the lie forming before she even opened her mouth, a desperate attempt to protect him from a truth he didn't deserve to carry. But Lorenzo's eyes were already on her, too perceptive, too familiar with the way she hid behind silence. "It's no one," Aria whispered, hating how fragile she sounded. Lorenzo didn't reply. He only watched her, and the weight of his gaze made her chest tighten. Aria felt his jealousy storming beneath the surface, but there was something else tangled with it. Fear, the kind he refused to acknowledge. She tried to look away, hoping distance could calm the tremor in her hands, but being near him only dragged her deeper into a night she wasn't ready to survive. Lorenzo moved closer. "Aria, who is he?" The softness in his tone was worse than anger. It pulled at the guilt she spent years burying, stirring memories she prayed would stay forgotten. Her pulse stung as Matteo's name echoed in her mind, the man who once controlled her through silence, through shadows, through the kind of power that never needed to be spoken out loud. Aria's breath hitched, and Lorenzo caught it. That small break in her voice shifted everything. His shoulders lowered, the edges of his anger dulling. He wasn't trying to interrogate her anymore. He was trying to understand why she looked like she was bracing for impact. "Aria," he said quietly, "I'm not trying to fight with you. Just tell me the truth." She wished he had stayed angry. Anger she could handle. But this tenderness, this concern in his voice, felt like someone pressing on a bruise she refused to admit was there. It made her chest ache in ways she couldn't hide. She forced herself to swallow, forced the truth up even though it felt like it would tear her apart. "Lorenzo, it's not what you think." "That's not an answer." His voice wasn't cold, but it pushed her closer to the edge she'd been avoiding. The tension between them stretched painfully thin, as if a single breath could tear it. Aria could feel his fear now, the fear of losing her, the fear of being replaced, the fear of something happening to her that he didn't know how to protect her from. Her fingers trembled. The texts, they're from Matteo. Lorenzo went still, completely still. She felt him pull away even though his feet never moved. His silence cut into her, sharp enough to steal her next breath. The name alone was enough to shatter whatever fragile trust had been balancing between them. Matteo, her past, her mistake, her warning she never spoke about. And Lorenzo knew exactly what that name meant without needing any explanation. "Aria?" he whispered, voice unsteady now. "Why would he be texting you?" She looked at him, finally letting him see the fear she kept locked behind every smile, every deflection, every carefully built wall. Because he doesn't let go of what he thinks he owns. The room fell silent. Not the peaceful kind. This silence felt like the moment just before something breaks. Lorenzo's jaw clenched, but his eyes held something entirely different. Not anger, not jealousy, something far more painful. "And you didn't think you could tell me?" Aria stepped back. She didn't trust her voice, didn't trust herself not to crumble. Because this wasn't about Matteo anymore. This was about the distance she created out of old survival habits. Habits Lorenzo didn't deserve to carry the consequences of. "I didn't want to pull you into it," she said softly. "You've already done enough for me." His expression darkened, not with rage, but with the realization of exactly what she was doing. "So you think leaving me out is protecting me?" Her silence answered for her. Lorenzo let out a shaky breath, as if the weight of everything she wasn't saying was crushing him. "Aria, don't walk away from me right now." But Aria was already retreating, inch by inch, like someone who knew staying would break both of them. "Lorenzo, I can't drag you into this. You think losing you hurts less? His voice cracked, raw and too real. You think watching you shut down and disappear is something I can just accept? Aria closed her eyes. She felt the heartbreak before it even happened, felt the moment his fear met her guilt, felt the moment her silence became the goodbye she didn't have the strength to speak out loud. I'm sorry, Aria whispered. Lorenzo reached for her, then stopped himself, as if touching her now would only push her further away. Don't do this. Aria, don't make me realize what losing you feels like. Her breath shook. I don't know how to stay without hurting you. And I don't know how to let you go without breaking, he said, voice unsteady. So tell me how we're supposed to survive this. But Aria didn't have an answer. She turned, and Lorenzo felt the impact like a punch he couldn't block. Her silence was worse than any final words. It left him standing in the doorway, holding the weight of every fear he'd tried to bury, every insecurity he'd tried to hide, every feeling he never expected to have for her. Only when the echo of the door closing faded did Lorenzo finally understand the truth. His jealousy had never been about another man. It had been about the terror of losing the one person he didn't know how to live without. And by the time he realized it, Aria was already gone. Top of form. Bottom of form. Aria felt the weight of the night before Lorenzo even spoke. His voice entered the silence like something fragile, trying not to break, yet every word carried the strain he couldn't hide. Aria. Who's messaging you at 3 a.m? He didn't raise his voice. That was what made her breath catch. Quiet jealousy always cut deeper, and she felt herself flinch before she could stop it. She hated that reaction, hated that her past still lived inside her bones like a bruise that refused to fade. Lorenzo noticed instantly. Of course he did. And the confusion in his eyes only sharpened the tension already filling the space between them. She murmured, "It's no one." But the lie tasted bitter and useless the moment it left her mouth. Lorenzo's expression changed in that subtle way he never admitted to, hurt tightening behind his attempt at calm. Aria felt that hurt like a pulse inside her chest, and she wished she could rewind the moment, breathe differently, speak differently, stop the fear that curled around her whenever the past called her name. But Lorenzo stepped closer, not demanding, not accusing, just watching her with a mixture of jealousy and worry he didn't know how to separate. He whispered, "You're shaking." Why? And Aria's heart almost stopped at how gently he said it. That softness was the one thing she was never prepared for. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself, but her throat refused to obey. She avoided his gaze, but Lorenzo wasn't someone she could escape by looking away. He felt everything, even when she tried to give him nothing. The forced closeness of the moment pressed against her like a truth she had no strength to confront. She told herself not to tremble, not to show him the fear Matteo had carved into her, not to let Lorenzo see the version of her she had buried years ago. But the trembling grew worse each time she felt his eyes lingering with a kind of protectiveness she didn't feel she deserved. The ache in Lorenzo's chest deepened as he watched her struggle. He tried to keep his breathing steady, tried to hide the jealousy rising in him like something he wished he could swallow back down. He didn't want to be this version of himself, doubting her, fearing her silence, imagining someone else's name on her lips. Yet the message wouldn't leave his mind, nor would Aria's reaction. The tension inside the room thickened with every second she refused to speak. It wasn't anger pulling them apart. It was fear, quiet and stubborn, living in both of them. Aria whispered, "Lorenzo, please, just drop it." But her voice cracked in the middle, and that single crack changed everything. She didn't sound annoyed. She sounded hurt, cornered, afraid of her own truth. And Lorenzo felt his own anger collapse beneath the weight of that sound. He stepped closer. "Aria, look at me." She didn't, couldn't. Not when she felt the past reaching for her, not when she felt Lorenzo's presence pulling her in the opposite direction. Two worlds tugging at her from both sides, one she escaped from, one she didn't want to lose. But Lorenzo needed answers he didn't know how to ask for. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and finally breathed. "I'm not trying to accuse you. I need to understand why you look like you're about to fall apart." His voice lowered, thick with something he never admitted out loud. "Who is he?" The question hung between them like a thread stretched too thin. Aria's chest tightened so violently she thought she might actually break. She whispered, "It's not what you think." But that wasn't enough, and she knew it. Her silence had already built a distance she couldn't cross back over. She felt Lorenzo's jealousy, sharp, trembling, terrified, and knew she caused it. And yet telling him the truth felt like opening a door she had spent years trying to lock forever. Lorenzo wasn't a man who cried easily, but something about her trembling, something about her refusal to meet his eyes, something about the way she kept stepping backward as if protecting him from herself, it all hit him with a grief he didn't understand. He whispered her name again, softer this time. "Aria." And that softness nearly destroyed her. She almost told him, almost said the name she feared more than any nightmare, almost let the truth spill open between them, because Lorenzo looked at her like someone who deserved the truth, like someone who would catch it gently even if it shattered her on the way out. But the moment slipped away the second he reached for her phone. Aria froze. Her breath stilled. Her entire body went cold. Lorenzo didn't unlock it. He didn't need to. The screen had already lit up with the name she prayed would never appear again. Matteo. Lorenzo went still, completely still. He didn't speak, didn't breathe, didn't blink. The name alone was enough to twist everything inside him, jealousy blending with something darker, something painful, something he had been desperately trying not to imagine. Aria felt the world tighten around her as she whispered, "Lorenzo, don't react like that. Please." But he stepped back, and that step hurt worse than any raised voice ever could. "Matteo?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Aria, why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes burned instantly. "Because I didn't want you dragged into his world. Because he doesn't let go. Because you don't know what he's capable of." Lorenzo's jaw clenched. "I don't care what he's capable of. I care why you were shaking like that. I care why you didn't come to me." Aria felt her throat close as she whispered, "Because you shouldn't have to pay for my past. I won't let him use you to get to me." He took a step toward her. She took a step back, and that was the moment their hearts pulled in opposite directions. Lorenzo's voice cracked, just barely. "Aria, don't walk away." But she was already trembling, already breaking under the pressure of protecting him from things he didn't even understand. "If I stay," she whispered, "he will hurt you. I can't let that happen. Aria ... I have to go." The words left her like a goodbye she never meant to say, but it was too late to take them back. Lorenzo reached for her, then stopped himself, fingers curling helplessly at his side. She stepped away again, and with every step, he felt something inside him collapse, something he didn't know he needed until the moment he felt it slipping from his hands. Her final whisper was barely audible. "Please, let me protect you this time." She turned. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except watch the only person who made his life make sense walk toward a door she didn't want to cross. It wasn't until the latch clicked, soft, devastating, that Lorenzo finally broke through the paralysis gripping him. His voice was raw, stripped of pride, stripped of fear, stripped of everything except the truth that lived beneath the jealousy. "Don't let her go." The order left his lips like a confession, because he finally understood. He wasn't afraid of Matteo. He was afraid of losing Aria. Top of form, bottom of form. Aria's voice was nothing like the steady calm Lorenzo had grown used to. It came through the darkness of the hallway, fragile, trembling, as if she were trying to hold herself together with nothing but breath. He had only intended to walk past to give her space the way she always insisted she didn't need. But the moment he heard that quiet break in her words, something in him stopped. She didn't see him at first. She stood with her back slightly turned, gripping her phone as though it burned her. Her replies were soft, barely audible, but every pause between them told a story far louder than anything she said. Lorenzo couldn't make out the other voice, but he didn't need to. Pain has a way of revealing itself even through silence, and Aria sounded like she was trying not to fall apart. When she finally ended the call and lifted her head, she turned, only to find Lorenzo watching. The instant their eyes met, fear flashed across hers, sharp and instinctive, as if she'd been caught bleeding. And then she looked away, fast, almost painfully fast. Aria. His voice held a gentleness he didn't intend, quieter than the storm building inside him. Who was that? She shook her head and tried to steady her breathing, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Lorenzo, please, don't. The words weren't cold. They were desperate, fragile, the kind spoken by someone who has survived too much by staying silent. He stepped closer, not to corner her, not to demand anything, but because watching her retreat into herself again felt unbearable. You're shaking, Lorenzo said softly. I'm fine. But her voice broke on the last syllable, and she winced as if the sound itself exposed her. He waited, and the waiting made her more tense. Aria wasn't used to people standing still for her. She wasn't used to someone refusing to walk away at the first sign of resistance. Her gaze fixed on the ground, unable to meet his, as if revealing her eyes might reveal everything she was fighting to hide. Talk to me, he whispered. Just talk to me. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to lean into that softness, to let him take the weight for just 1 minute, but instinct won over longing. Please, she whispered, don't ask. Those 2 words hit him harder than he expected. Something inside Lorenzo cracked open, a place he never let anyone reach. Her pain felt personal in a way that made no sense, and every sense at once. He hadn't known her long, not truly, yet he couldn't watch her crumble without feeling something inside him shift into protectiveness so fierce it bordered on fear. Aria. Whoever that was, whatever they said. She turned away as if the conversation itself burned. It's nothing, I need a moment. But her voice was too raw, too shaken, too deeply wounded to sound like nothing. Lorenzo's chest tightened. He kept his tone steady, calm, but the softness in it revealed too much. Did they hurt you? Have they hurt you before? She froze. Completely. And then the smallest, quietest exhale escaped her lips. Not an answer, but something dangerously close to one. That stillness was enough. Lorenzo stepped closer, and this time she didn't move away, not out of willingness, but because she was too tired to. When he gently reached for her arm, she flinched, immediately pulling back with a whisper of apology that only made the ache in his chest deepen. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean... You don't have to apologize for being afraid, he answered. You don't have to apologize for anything. The words settled between them, heavy and warm, unexpectedly intimate. Aria's eyes finally lifted to his, and for the first time, she didn't hide. What he saw there wasn't weakness. It was exhaustion, years of holding herself up alone, years of expecting nothing from anyone. Why do you look at me like that? She whispered, not accusingly, but almost confused. Like what? Like you care. He didn't know how to answer without telling the truth she wasn't ready for, so he stayed quiet. And it was his silence that told her everything. For the first time, her guard slipped. Her shoulders sagged, her breath shook, and her voice softened with a confession she didn't mean to give. "It was Matteo," she said finally. He called." The name hit the air like a blade. Lorenzo felt something cold and furious rise inside him. Not jealousy, not anger at her, fear. Protective fear so sharp he couldn't breathe for a moment. Matteo. The man Aria never spoke about except in fragments she never meant to reveal. The man who left shadows in her eyes whenever his name came near her story. The man who once owned her through fear. Lorenzo understood in an instant. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't her running from the past. This was danger with a name. "What did he want?" Lorenzo asked, voice dangerously steady. Aria shook her head again, but this time the tremble wasn't from fear alone. It was from resolve. "It doesn't matter." "It does." "No." She stepped back, creating space between them that hurt more than she expected. "I can't drag you into this." "You're not dragging me." "I am," she whispered, "and I won't. You're safe as long as you're not involved." The words lodged in his chest like splinters. She wasn't pulling away because she didn't trust him. She wasn't refusing him because she didn't feel anything. She was distancing herself to protect him. Aria took a breath, one that sounded like heartbreak dressed as strength. "I need to go, before things get worse." Lorenzo stared at her, stunned by the clarity of the moment. She wasn't running from him. She was trying to save him. And the realization twisted something deep inside him, something he didn't know he possessed until now. "Aria," he said quietly, stepping forward, "don't walk away from me." Her voice barely held. "I have to." And when she moved toward the door, Lorenzo felt the truth hit him with devastating force. He couldn't let her face Matteo alone. He couldn't pretend he didn't feel what he felt. He couldn't stand still while she broke herself trying to protect him, because somewhere along the way, without permission or warning, Aria had become the person he could not bear to lose. And that changed everything. Top of form, bottom of form. Aria felt the vibration before she was fully awake, a sharp pulse against her palm that dragged her out of the thin layer of sleep she'd been clinging to. Her fingers curled around the phone instinctively, as if she could smother the sound, hide it before anyone noticed. But the moment her eyes found the name she refused to speak, even in her own thoughts, her breath stopped mid-chest. It felt like a blade pressed against old wounds she had spent years pretending had healed. Lorenzo's voice came from behind her, low, rough with sleep, but alert in a way that made her heart jolt. "Aria. Who's texting you at 3 a.m? She didn't turn, couldn't. The phone felt too hot in her hand, her pulse too loud. "It's nothing," she whispered. "Don't worry about it." Even to her own ears, the lie trembled. Lorenzo moved closer. She felt it, his presence, the way he filled silence without touching it. There was hesitation in his steps, as if he was torn between giving her space and needing to understand the fear that had flashed across her face before she smothered it. "Aria," he said again, softer this time, and something inside her clenched. She could handle anger. She could endure suspicion. But gentleness, his gentleness, made the cracks in her walls impossible to ignore. She forced a breath, willing herself to steady. "It's not important." But Lorenzo heard everything she didn't say. She felt the air shift as he stopped just behind her, close enough that she sensed the tension in him, the way he was holding himself back. "Then why?" he asked quietly. "Do you look like someone just pulled you out of a nightmare?" The question hit harder than she expected. Her throat tightened. Her fingers curled around the phone until her knuckles ached. She didn't want him to see the fear. She didn't want anyone to see it, but especially not him. Not the one person whose opinion could shatter her more deeply than the past ever had. She swallowed hard. "Please, don't ask." The words left her before she had time to think them through, and the moment they did, she felt the shift in him. Not anger, not frustration. Something far more dangerous: concern. Lorenzo stepped closer, involuntary, instinctive, as if something in her voice had pulled him in. She felt him hesitate again, felt the restraint that battled against the need to keep her from slipping away into her silence. "Aria," he murmured, "you're shaking." She didn't even realize she was until he said it. Her breath faltered, her chest tightening painfully. She wanted to step back, create space, hide the weakness she had survived by denying. But the moment she tried, Lorenzo gently reached out, barely touching her arm, not enough to hold her, only enough to stop her from running from a truth she wasn't ready to face. "Talk to me," he whispered. "Please." That single word nearly broke her. She stared down at the phone, at the name glowing like a brand on the screen. Matteo, the one she'd spent years escaping. The one who still found ways to remind her that running didn't erase history, it only delayed confrontation. Aria felt her breath splinter. She almost told Lorenzo. She almost let herself trust him enough to say it aloud. But fear wasn't logical. It wasn't kind. It whispered that letting Lorenzo know the truth would only place him exactly where she never wanted him to be, in danger because of her. "I can't," she breathed, the words raw. "Not this." Lorenzo didn't move. He didn't push. He just looked at her with a softness that made her chest ache. "You don't have to protect me, Aria." But she did. She always did. And the ache in her chest was the truth she couldn't speak. "I'm not afraid for myself. I'm afraid for you." Before she could respond, Lorenzo's eyes dropped to the phone still clenched in her hand. The screen lit again, the same name, the same silent threat. His expression changed instantly, not with anger, not with accusation, with fear. "Matteo?" Lorenzo said the name so quietly she almost missed it. "That's who's calling you." Her heart stopped. She felt her pulse crash into her throat. Lorenzo stepped back, not in rejection, but in realization, as if the pieces were arranging themselves into a picture he didn't know how to accept. His voice broke slightly when he spoke again. "Aria, why didn't you tell me?" She felt her breath crumble. "Because you weren't supposed to know." He looked at her as if she had just confirmed his worst fear. "He's the one you ran from." She couldn't answer. Silence said enough. Lorenzo's eyes darkened, not with jealousy, but something heavier, deeper, something that made the air around them feel fragile. She could see the moment clarity hit him, the moment he understood the message wasn't about betrayal, it was about danger, and that terrified him more. "Aria," he said slowly, "what did he say to you?" She shook her head quickly. "Lorenzo, stop. You don't need to get involved." "I'm already involved." His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. The quiet sincerity in it wrapped around her heart and squeezed until it hurt. She took a shaky step back. "If he finds out you're here, if he thinks you matter to me..." Lorenzo's breath caught. "Do I?" The question slipped out, unguarded, raw. Aria closed her eyes because the truth was too loud in the space between them. She wished she could lie. She wished she could pretend the answer wasn't written all over her silence. But the moment stretched too long, and Matteo's name glowed again on her phone, tearing her back into reality. "Lorenzo!" she whispered, voice breaking. "I need to go." His entire body stilled. "You're leaving." "I have to. I can't let him use me to hurt you." Lorenzo shook his head, disbelief warring with fear. "Aria, you don't have to run from me." "I'm not running from you," she whispered, her voice trembling as she stepped toward the door. "I'm trying to save you." The words shattered whatever strength she had left. She didn't turn back. She couldn't. But she felt Lorenzo's gaze on her like a hand pressed to her heart, holding it still. In the silence that followed, something broke open inside him, the realization he'd been resisting all along. His jealousy wasn't born from suspicion. It was born from fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of not being enough to keep her safe. Fear that every truth she hid was one step pulling her away from him. And as Aria's hand closed around the door handle, Lorenzo finally understood with devastating clarity. She wasn't choosing distance. She was choosing his safety over her own. And nothing had ever hurt him more. Top of form, bottom of form. Aria felt the night pressing against her skin long before the phone even rang. Something inside her had already sensed it. Some part of her that always recognized danger before it arrived. When the screen lit up at 3 a.m., her breath fractured. She didn't move at first. She simply stared, hoping the call would vanish if she stayed perfectly still. But the vibration continued, relentless, dragging every buried fear to the surface. She answered only because silence felt worse. Lorenzo lifted his head the moment he heard her whisper. Her voice wasn't soft the way it usually was when she spoke at night. It was broken, fragile, carrying a kind of pain that made his chest tighten. He didn't understand the words she said into the phone, but he understood the tremble. He understood the strain in every syllable. And when she finally ended the call, she stood frozen, gripping the phone like it hurt to hold it. "Aria," Lorenzo murmured, the quietest ache shaping her name. "Tell me who that was." The question hit her like impact. Her instinct wasn't to answer, it was to step away. She did it without realizing, retreating a single step, even though she had nowhere meaningful to go. Emotional distance always came first. It was the shield that had kept her alive before she ever knew him. "I don't want to talk about it," Aria whispered, her voice barely existing. Lorenzo felt something twist in him. Not anger, not jealousy. Something deeper and far more painful. A quiet fear he didn't know how to name. She wasn't avoiding him. She was scared. She was scared and still wouldn't let him close enough to understand why. His breath shook slightly. "Aria, it's 3 a.m. She closed her eyes. The weight of her silence settled heavily between them. She wanted to lie, tell him it was nothing, pretend it didn't matter. But the words wouldn't come. Not convincingly. Not with her pulse still trembling in her throat. "You're afraid," Lorenzo said before he could stop himself. "Why?" The question shattered the fragile calm she was trying to hold. Her shoulders tightened in a way that felt like desperation, not to hide from him, but to hide from whatever truth the night was trying to drag out of her. She hated how exposed she felt. She hated that Lorenzo could see right through her when she spent years making sure no one could. "Please," Aria breathed, "don't ask me this." Her voice was raw, more vulnerable than anything she had allowed him to hear. It made Lorenzo's heart stumble. That tone, she had never used it with him, not even when she was hurting. And something about it broke him in a way anger never could. He stepped closer, not to corner her, but because the distance hurt too much. He didn't touch her. He only stood close enough for Aria to feel the softness in his presence, the softness he tried so hard to hide from her. "I'm not trying to force you," Lorenzo whispered, "but I can't stand watching you shake like that." The confession slipped out, almost accidental, but it was real, painfully real, and it cracked something inside her she had held shut for too long. Aria swallowed hard, fighting back emotions she never wanted to reveal. She tried to speak, tried to lie, tried anything to keep the truth buried. "It was just a mistake," she said weakly. It doesn't matter." Lorenzo's expression shifted in a way she felt rather than saw, not with anger, not even with jealousy, but with a deep, aching disbelief. He knew she wasn't telling the truth. He could hear it in the way her words trembled like they were breaking on her tongue. "Aria," he said quietly, "someone doesn't make you look like that by mistake." Her heartbeat stung. The truth hovered dangerously close, and she knew if Lorenzo pushed even a little harder, everything she had locked away would come pouring out uncontrollably. She wasn't ready for that. She wasn't ready for him to know. She wasn't ready for him to care. She turned her face away. "Lorenzo, please." That was when everything shifted. He looked down and saw the name on her phone, the name she had never spoken aloud since the day she walked away from her old life. Matteo. The one person she still feared more than anything. The one person who had once claimed her like she was something he owned. The room didn't change, but Lorenzo did. Not with anger and not with jealousy, with fear. Real, sharp, protective fear. "Aria," he whispered, breath unsteady. "Why is he calling you?" Her chest caved inward. She had never wanted him to find out. Not like this. Not through a name glowing on a screen. The truth wasn't just a confession. It was a scar. And she never intended to place that scar in Lorenzo's hands. She stepped back again, but this time it wasn't avoidance. It was heartbreak. Her voice cracked on impact. "Lorenzo, I didn't want you involved. I can't let you be anywhere near this." He shook his head, stunned. "Involved? Aria, Don't," she whispered sharply, panic rising like floodwater. "You don't understand what he's capable of. If he knows you're in my life, he'll—" He caught her arm, not to restrain her, but to stop her from drowning in fear alone. "Aria, look at me." She did, and it shattered him, because Aria wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting him. He felt the truth strike deep, stealing the air from his lungs. She wasn't afraid of Matteo reaching her. She was terrified Matteo would reach him, and she'd rather break her own heart than risk that. "Lorenzo," she whispered, voice trembling, "I need to go before this becomes something that hurts you." His chest tightened with a pain he hadn't been prepared for. He released her arms slowly, as if every inch of letting go made something inside him tear. He could feel her slipping away, feel the goodbye in her silence before she even moved. "Aria," Lorenzo breathed, "you can't just walk away like this." She shook her head. "I have to. For you." The simplest words, the cruelest truth. And then she walked past him, each step soft enough to be silent and heavy enough to be final. The door closed gently behind her, but it struck him harder than slamming would have. Lorenzo stood still, every beat of his heart echoing in the empty space she left behind. Only then did the realization hit him with devastating clarity. She wasn't his to lose, but he had already lost her. He wasn't jealous because he doubted her. He was jealous because he cared enough to be terrified. And the truth she never intended to reveal had already rewritten everything he felt, everything he feared, everything he was suddenly desperate not to let go. Final summary for better understanding. Aria had been restless for days, carrying a tension she never explained, a quiet storm that hovered behind her eyes. Lorenzo noticed every shift in her, every time she pulled her hands away too quickly or froze at a sound he couldn't hear. He sensed something circling her, something she refused to name, but she never let him close enough to understand it. Everything broke open at 3 a.m. The sharp ring of Aria's phone sliced through the silence, and she stiffened before she even reached for it. Her heart was already racing, her breath already unsteady, as if she had been dreading this exact moment. Lorenzo watched her with a kind of helpless alarm, unable to look away from the tremble in her fingers or the way her voice cracked when she whispered a barely audible, "Hello." He heard nothing from the other end of the call, but he felt the fear radiating off her, tightening every line of her posture. When she hung up, she looked like someone trying to hide a wound that hadn't stopped bleeding. Lorenzo quietly asked the question he already knew she wouldn't want to answer. "Aria, who was that?" Aria stepped back instinctively, like distance could protect her from everything she didn't want to reveal. Her eyes lowered. Her breath shook. She whispered that the call was a mistake, but the lie was too fragile to hide behind. Lorenzo wasn't angry. He was afraid. Afraid for her. Afraid of what she wasn't telling him. Afraid of losing her to something he didn't yet understand. The night trapped them together, and what should have been ordinary silence became heavy with unsaid confessions and choked back fear. Lorenzo kept searching her face for truth. Aria kept avoiding his eyes like looking at him would break her resolve. Hours passed, but the tension didn't soften. Lorenzo reached out once, carefully, gently. And the moment he touched her wrist, her defenses wavered. She felt his sincerity, his quiet desperation, his need to understand what was hurting her. That single touch cracked something inside her, the part of her that had spent so long pretending she didn't need anyone. She whispered again that it was nothing, a mistake, but Lorenzo heard the pain under her denial. He didn't push. He simply asked her not to shut him out. His voice wasn't demanding. It was breaking. That was what unraveled her. Her vulnerability wasn't loud. It was a fragile exhale, a tremor, a moment where she couldn't hold her walls up anymore. Lorenzo felt her fear before he heard the truth behind it. Something had happened to her. Something that made her believe that letting anyone close was dangerous. But the truth she finally revealed was heavier than he imagined. The call and the message left afterward came from Matteo, the man who once claimed her like she was not a person, but something he owned. Someone controlling. Someone who blurred the line between affection and possession. Someone who was never truly gone, even when she left him. She had escaped, but she had not freed herself. His shadow still followed her, waiting for moments exactly like this, moments when she might be happy, so he could remind her that she didn't deserve peace. Lorenzo's entire world shifted hearing Matteo's name. Pieces clicked together. The guardedness in Aria's voice, the way she always checked the time, the flinch she hid whenever someone touched their phone around her. She wasn't avoiding Lorenzo because she didn't care. She was protecting him from the threat she believed she brought into his life by simply existing near him. Aria's heartbreak was rooted in a truth she never wanted to voice. She had already fallen for Lorenzo long before she realized she was in danger again. And Matteo, with one call, had ripped open everything she tried to bury. Forced into a corner of fear and love, Aria made the choice she believed would save Lorenzo. She left, not because she didn't want him, but because she wanted him safe, because she knew Matteo's obsession, because she couldn't bear seeing Lorenzo become a target. Lorenzo watched her walk away, watched the door close with a soft finality that shouldn't have felt like an ending, but did. The silence afterward was suffocating. He touched the empty space she left behind and felt the truth crash over him. He wasn't losing someone casual. He wasn't losing someone passing through his life. He was losing the one person he didn't realize had become essential until she was already gone. The weight of her fear became the weight in his chest. Her heartbreak became the echo inside his own. And Lorenzo finally understood something devastatingly simple. Aria didn't belong to Matteo's past. She belonged to a future she was too afraid to claim. And losing her, even for her own protection, felt like a wound he didn't know how to heal.